The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Kiwi.
In some towns, kids play soccer, and in this town, kids play rock and roll, you know? Yeah, I don't know, it's just like there's a recording studio in this little town, and it's kind of weird, it's just what the kids did.
Again. And hit your floor. Okay. We'll start laying some down. I'll give you the thumbs.
What you're listening to there is the footage from a documentary screening on the documentary channel just in time for New Zealand Music Month. The documentary is called Guitars from the Leafy Suburbs. It's been put together by Julian McCarthy, and he joins me live in the Kiwi studio this morning. Hello to you, Julian.
Hi there.
Nice to have you in. Now, this documentary is all about the bands that are coming out from one particular suburb in Auckland. That is Devonport. Julian, what attracted you to this particular story from the New Zealand music scene?
I suppose it was the chance to kind of get in on the ground floor in a way. I mean, there were a number of bands who were forming around a studio in Devonport, and I suppose the unusual thing about them was that a lot of them had come from Takapuna Grammar School. They were friends, and I sort of got introduced to the situation through a documentary I'd made earlier. And
what was that?
I was about an artist, actually, sort of anti-war artist called Alan Taylor, but it was he had an exhibition over in the depot in Devonport, and this music studio was out the back, and so I spent a bit of time there helping set up the exhibition, and there was a video involved with that, and Linda Blinko, who ran the depot, she said to me, "You might be interested in what's going on out the back there." So I went out there and met Ricky Morris, who was running the studio, and I'd heard of the Checks and some of the other bands, but I didn't realise quite how the whole thing operated, and it was kind of a hothouse really of these bands, a place where they came together, they hung out, and it was a pretty interesting little scene going on. So,
because of course you got the Checks, Electric Confectionaires, even the Veils.
Yeah, originally, yeah. Finn Andrews recorded there originally, and that was kind of the catalyst for a lot of these bands who they also, not all of them, but a lot of them went to Takapuna Grammar, and he'd been there a couple of years older than them, and they saw what happened to him, and they weren't just random people. No. They obviously had a lot of musical talent anyway, but they thought, wow, let's have a piece of this, and they kind of gravitated towards this little recording studio with Ricky Morris at the depot, and he's kind of operated as a talent scout, I guess. I mean, he not necessarily for his own gain. I mean, he didn't take these, didn't manage these bands, but he could see talent there, and he invited them to come in and do demos and stuff like that, and the thing grew from there.
Did you discover what was happening at Takapuna Grammar? I mean, why were these students particularly coming from this school? Was there a great music department there?
I think it was supported to some extent, but I certainly tried to dig that one out. But in some ways, I think it was a kind of a time and a place kind of thing where something big happened. I mean, in recent years, music has really been supported at high schools and all kinds of music and stuff like that. But something about it, there was a few, I guess, key characters.
Not like parents, because a lot of these kids, parents were also in bands many years ago as well.
Yeah, well, that's true. So like obviously,
would it be the perfect storm happening in Devonport, the perfect musical storm?
Well, you could say that. Part of what created the storm, I'm not sure that those parents were kind of shoving them along or whatever, but they certainly had an interest in music. And the other thing that was kind of interesting about what happened there was the parents of a number of these guys still had their old vinyl collections at home, and these guys started digging into that, you know. Jimi Hendrix, the Yardbirds, Cream, all sorts of stuff like that, and it became a kind of common base for what that particular group were into, and you know, you can hear it in their music. You can still hear it, you know, 5 years later.
Yeah.
That influence, yeah.
It's extraordinary. Some of these bands, like the Czechs, they started playing out in pubs even before they were old enough to drink as well, didn't they?
Yeah, it's true. You know, we filmed various gigs all over the place, but the ones in the pubs, you know, some of them had to have their mum down there, you know, otherwise they couldn't get in. And some of them were a bit old, you know, the bands that we covered, they ranged, there's probably about a 5-year age difference between the oldest and the youngest, but yeah, they were, you know, really talented young guys. Yeah.
Can the Devonport scene, can it be compared to anything else previously in New Zealand music's history? Because everyone's heard of the Dunedin scene.
Yeah, I mean, there is that sort of comparison, but you know, that seems to come, you know, they were older and started older. There wasn't, you know, as you say, some of these were pretty young kids when they started, and because of what happened with them, there's even younger ones. I've seen them recently in the studio, you know, 12-year-old kids, intermediate school Battle of the Bands winners in there, who absolutely amazing guitarists who you just think, who the hell is that, you know, in the recording studio. Fantastic.
Have you heard of the critics of this scene in Devonport, you know, because they say, oh, well, you know, privileged kids, you know, from North Shore, they're hardly, you know, growing up in the dirty old, you know, rock and roll and doing it tough and you know, I mean, I guess they were kids, but you know, they weren't in scungy flats, you know, and really coming from a place of hardship.
Well, I guess that's true of some of them, but not many of them, in fact. I think it's the combination of that they wanted to do it, and some of them had parents who were keen on them doing it, but we filmed at some of their place, you know, their homes, whatever, and you know, they're not the sort of upper crust of Devonport. They're not living on the back streets, that's for sure, but you know, they're kind of regular kids in a way.
Yeah. Keeping Devonport honest.
Yeah. And some of them, you know, solo parent families, that sort of stuff. You know, they're not living the high life.
Is the scene still burgeoning there? I mean, because we've heard of these names for a wee while now, like the Electric Confectioneers and the Czechs and the Vales. You know, do you know if it's still going on? Is it refreshing itself?
Well, it is. I mean, there's heaps of new bands coming out of there. There's something like. There's a practice space associated with that studio and a couple of other practice spaces, and I think there's something like 60 or 70 different bands that practice in there. But what's happened is, you know, Ricky Morris left that studio, and I don't think there's quite the same thing going on. That what happened there was one of those things where those very talented bands were together, and they had someone with a studio who, I guess, mentored them as well, and you know, the whole thing just kind of grew. And they, I guess, the interesting thing as well is they didn't compete against each other. You know, they were friends, and those guys swapped bands. You know, if someone falls over, gets sick, or something like that, those other guys in the other bands, they just step into their play, all know each other's music, they jam after hours, they'll go down, they certainly used to, you know, go down and jam after a party or something. They'd jam and they'd go into the studio and practice and play till, you know, 6 in the morning.
And what's also interesting when you're saying that they're playing on each other's songs or, you know, jamming together, is that the band's sounds are quite different.
Yeah, they are, but they also, they all have, I mean, some amazing musicians in there. Jizzy Sheehan is one that, you know, all the others, they, from the Electric Confectioneers, they call him a freak, you know, because, and this is from guys who have plenty of natural talent, but, you know, they talk about him as the freak because he can do it, you know, he can rattle a knife and a fork on a plate and get some amazing music out of it. He is fantastic, and they just. But they have a good ear for what the others are doing, but they're kind of each on their own path, and that's kind of interesting. They haven't all come out doing the same stuff. They've got their own sound and their own kind of roots of music where they sort of originate from, and it's interesting.
Well, you can watch this documentary. It is called Guitars from the Leafy Suburbs on the documentary channel on Sky. It is screening this Saturday, the 8th of May. Thanks so much, Julian McCarthy, for coming in and telling us all about it.
Days to go.